the author of the class gave me both sections because he knew that I could reference animating in Maya from the other class, and any of the modules, and we could talk about it, because it's not really just about me just evaluating your work, it's about me helping you. And so just looking forward, I believe Maya is free, and we can talk about this today. I can run through this. We'll just do it right now. So remember that this isn't until next week, a week from today. Well, let's just take a look at it. So they run through a history of 3D animation. There's a couple of things that come to mind. One is Future World. That was as early as 1976. Star Wars, A New Hope. This was the green plans for the Death Star, and that was 1976. Tron, 1982, right? I don't know if anyone's ever seen that movie, but the graphics in there were actually pretty good. I'll just play a little bit of this. This computer graphics, Maya, hardline rendering, very simple paint, a little bit of gradient, a little bit of light. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this movie. And then the bikes, right? There's a big bike race.
Mr. Billy, we can't really hear anything.
Yeah, the sound is really low on this. All right, and then there's just a bunch of other things. Then it just kind of starts up, it ramps up. The first usage of 3D in animation, there were a couple of things. One, the very early was the dining room scene in Beauty and the Beast, where Belle and the Beast are dancing, and that whole background was done in Maya. And then there were some computer graphics that were done in The Lion King with Zazu's beak and a bunch of background animals. And then it just kind of took off. By 1986, Steve Jobs had purchased the animation wing away from ILM, Industrial Light and Magic. And but that was a little bit earlier, but John Lasseter was responsible for doing Luxo Jr., Tin Toy, Andre and Wally B. And then it just became, every iteration of Maya becomes a little bit more complicated with modeling, texturing, lighting, rigging, animation, rendering, compositing, toon shading, all of that. All right, let's see which of these images the most primitive graphics? All right, so what they're going to tell you here, so they're showing you examples of Luxo, they're showing you examples of animation, and if you can get the Maya installed, then these examples are really good. Let's just take a look at them because they're only a minute long. And there's no audio, I don't think. So this is just the lamp doing what's called a take. So I'm going to go back to the first frame. So he's down, and then he does like a little shake, and he goes further down for an anticipation, comes up, and he overshoots the position. So let me actually draw those out for you. All right, so the lamp is in kind of this position here. And I'm just going to use the center point because his action is on an arc. It's like this. And this is the starting position's about right here. And then he comes down to a anticipation position here. So this is key number 1. and then he goes down into the anticipation, and then he goes up and overshoots the final position. So that this final position is about right here, right? I'm going to do that in a different color so you can see it. And the center point for that would be about right here. And so you start on 1, you go to the anticipation, you crash through your arc as fast as you want. If the anticipation is here, then it's just maybe 2 or 3 frames, and then you overshoot. The center position comes out up to about here, which would bring the actual lamp about like that. And then you settle. And then from this position right here, this is the main key. This is the main upper key. And then you settle from this position back into this position. And I'll just take those 2 and put them over here. And those, so the idea of a settle is that you go about 1/3, and then you start to slow down. And you can use something like that. That's one example. Here's another example where it's just maybe a little simpler. It's 1/2, 1/4, and 1/8. That's a settle. So remember that the whole rocking starts, the position of the lamp starts, it goes into the anticipation, it goes backwards for the overshoot, and then settles. So each one of these is a key. So one, and you can do that with just 4 different keys. And so in Maya, you would set these ease in and ease out parameters. And I think that that's what our author was trying to get at. There's also an interaction with the ball. Oh yeah, this guy he jumps. And that's done with probably 16 different keys. The lamp starts, takes an anticipation, jumps, goes through the arc, lands, overshoots, and settles. It's the same terminology, it's a different action. Oh yeah, here's the one with the ball. All right, so that's just as simple as it gets. Michael wanted just a total of 2.5 seconds worth of animation there. And then he goes through it. So this one has audio on it. So let's take a look at this.
I'd like to show you what it means to bring a character to life, an inanimate object to life, more than just making it move. Principles of animation that apply to that. And one of them is in the timing. That is, when the object moves, in this case, moves its head and looks, there is a brief but very clear pause here that gives them a moment for the lamp to think about what it sees. That if it's just in constant motion, you wouldn't get that. So the pauses are very short, but like right in there, well, he's watching as the ball turns around again, but when it arrives, there, we get that especially long pause to give a chance to really think about what's looking at. Another principle is anticipation. Right before a lamp does something, it will anticipate or get ready to do it. That is, like here, when he's going to jump, before he jumps, he squashes down. So we get squash and stretch. Now, a lamp can't squash, of course. It's a hard, rigid object. But we get the feeling of the squash just in the pose. And then the stretch as he makes the jump. Also, the idea of follow through, where when he lands, he doesn't just stop in this pose, he keeps going down and then bounces back up. We also get from this the classic cartoon take. That is a surprise at something. So he looks and pauses. That's one of the important parts of it too, is he's got to see what he's looking at. Then he does a dip, and then a spring up, and
That's
then
the
a settle
overshoot.
back down.
That's the
And
settle.
this is just reflecting how even these things are done hand-drawn or character animation.
So this
Here's
is
the character looking.
these drawings here are from the Richard Williams book. And if anyone is even remotely serious about career in animation, I highly recommend the Animator Survival Kit by Richard Williams. It's $40. It's 300 pages, but and you have to read it. It is very thorough and very complete. It is the best animation text. So here he's just doing exactly what the lamp was doing. The lamp starts out in a neutral position. It goes into its anticipation. And here he's giving you a sense of what the timing is like for how to add squash and stretch just to a character reaction.
There's that squash, the spring up, and the settle, just as we saw with the lamp. So now looking at some of the examples of what we can do, there's that simple cartoon take. Looking
Down.
forward,
Down,
here about nine frames of that. The dip down
that's the anticipation.
and the spring up.
That's
You kinda
the
see here it
overshoot.
brings up- It pushes up the base a little bit, really exaggerate it. And then the settle.
Settle.
And that's a 2-second shot. Here we have a jump like we were seeing before. And this again follows the principles established just in character
This is from the Richard Williams book too.
for animation in humans, where they're just standing there, anticipation, the jump, stretching, pulls in while in the air, stretching back down, landing, and the legs bend. For the lamp, it's the neck, and then going back into neutral. We can see a real person doing that here. In neutral, dropping down anticipation, stretch, pulling in, extending out for the landing, dropping, the legs bending, and then coming back up. So there's getting ready, anticipation, stretching up, exaggerating as much as you can, pulling back in. There's the landing. Instead of stopping there, it
Overshoot
scrunches down as far as it can
and
and
settling
goes,
up.
into neutral. If you want to do a ball interaction, here we see the anticipation, a pause before looking, moving down, and there's the anticipation. It moves in the opposite direction before it moves into the direction of the intended action of the scene. There's the follow through where the head comes up. So all of the principles of animation that we were getting into with hand-drawn and clay and pixelation and cutout, all of that applies to CG animation and animating an inanimate object.
All right, so I think what I'd like to do is just to give you a heads up on next week. Let's just talk about and I realize we're doing this early, but that is okay because it might take you a day or so to install Maya or this other application here. Let's just keep going here. Once again, this is from the Richard Williams book. Yeah, this one is not. I don't know what this image is coming from. It could, yeah, it might be. I think this is all Richard Williams, and this is just what he was talking about. Richard Williams was the director for Roger Rabbit, and the original director for Thief and the Cobbler, but we don't have to go into that right now. So I've got a full class right here. I don't think anybody's absent. I am recording. So let me just play this one for you. This is 5 minutes. So if you're thinking about Maya, this is a good video for you.
So when you first open Maya, it might be a little bit scary. There is a lot of menus and controls and buttons and sliders. Well, take a deep breath. It's going to be all right. We're going to focus on just what we need to animate And this video will work on how to get things set up and just how to find your way around and launch a file. But there are a lot of steps that we're going to have to do here. One of them is to get some preferences set. So there is a preference button in the far corner, a little running guy who seems to be running away from a gear. If you go into time slider, playback, by default, it's play every frame. I'm just going to go one down, 24 frames per second. And that also should be on the time slider, frame rate, 24 frames per second. I think that's the default. And then hit save. That should get you going. To open the scene, it's File, Open Scene. Find your way to Luxo Ball Setup and open that. Don't save. This will get you into a scene with a lamp, a ball, and a floor. Just to kind of simplify things. See over here under display, that's going to hide the ball. To move around, first also make sure you're in the perspective view, because you have two views here. You have the camera and you have perspective. So go into perspective and holding down, well, in Mac, it's Command, in Windows, it's Control, main mouse button drag. And that's how you can move around. So just do this for a few moments just to see how that works. Also holding down Command or Control and middle mouse dragging makes it so you can slide around. It's moving the camera without rotating it. Middle mouse scroll is zoom. So get a hang of those controls first so you know how to quickly just rotate around things. Here's a little tip, is if you got something kind of off to the side, select something on here, in this case just the base, and hit the F. That centers on whatever you had selected. It'll make it easier to rotate. So you always want to be able to just easily spin whatever you're using. Now, we don't have any animation on here yet, but looking down at the timeline, if you want to advance a single frame, you hold down Option, period, to go forward, Option, comma, to go back. And when we have keys, we'll also want to use a tool called the Graph Editor, which is under Windows, Animation Editor, it's the top one, Graph Editor, and it opens up a separate window. And you'll see what this is for, but it's very important for timing and movement. Personally, I don't like having windows open and covering things. Let me show you something here. Panels, layouts, and there's a bunch of different choices. You can try different ones, but I'm going to do 3 panes split left. And then under panels for each one of these, you can select what they see. So here, I'm going to select camera. This shows what the camera sees, that you're going to actually finish and record in the end. And you can change it, but if you like it, you hit this little lock button, and that makes it so you can't accidentally change your camera view. Over here, I like to have this one set for perspective. And this happens to be where it's wireframe, shading, smooth shade, all. So, it's the second one down there. And then here is where I like to have my graph editor. So panels, panel, graph editor. I know that's a lot of steps there. Back up again and watch it again to do that, or just have one window open at a time. Oh, and then one other thing up here in the corner, by default, it might say modeling. I'll pull that menu down and choose animation. That changes all of the menus here to the animation options. And so now we've got the shots open and we know how to move around in the shot. And in the next one, we'll start animating.
So I wanted to
Switching
make a
camera view.
point right here.
And then,
Let me get
or
to a
just
good
have-
view.
or just have,
When students are first learning Maya, this whole interface can be just completely and totally intimidating, just absolutely intimidating. He didn't even show you that within each of these views, you can hit the space bar, and the space bar has like every single shortcut, every single menu, just it flies up on the screen. And animators just get really used to that little method of working in Maya. And like he said, with this little modeling button, animation button, it takes you a while to learn where all of this stuff is. The point that I wanted to make was that when Maya first started selling its application, well, it didn't actually sell it. It leased its application for about $250,000 per seat per year. And so my first contact with Maya was like way back in 1998, 1999. And you had to log in on Unix, and it was a very expensive tool. I went through the tutorial, I understood it pretty well. But then over the years, Maya has become free. And so during that whole time between the time when it was really, really expensive and the time it became free, they had a customer feedback that was just the industry standard. Users, animators, modelers, whatever it was allowed to comment back to Autodesk and say, actually, I don't think it was Autodesk yet, but they would just say, hey, this is wrong. This button should be here. And the word on the street, the history is that the people at Maya went in and very carefully looked at every single one of those little feedbacks from working professionals. And this hasn't changed very much. So you can just imagine, you can be as intimidated as you want and say, oh my God, this is just crazy. And that you know what happens with the application like Photoshop or something where there's an upgrade to it. And then as soon as it's upgraded, you have no idea where the buttons were, or some of the keyboard shortcuts are different, or going between a Mac version and a PC version can be harrowing sometimes. But this interface, because I've been responding to all those customer feedbacks, is as clean as you can get. And that's just on the surface of it. They've also done a bunch of stuff on the backside too, like where the RAM is kept, how it actually works, what are the subroutines. So keep that in mind. If you choose to use Maya right now, the interface is not going to change in the next 2, 3, 4 years. It's going to get better. Things are going to be minutely different, but they're not going to be crazy different. All right, so there's a couple other videos here, and this is for the people who are going to be using Maya. So let's just go ahead and look at this.
The big deal about computer animation is how you can refine the animation, layer in corrections and additions. And so, while this is okay, we'll look at how you can make changes. The first being timing. So I'm going to select all the controls. By the way, I'm not selecting this control out here because I never did put any animation on there. It's out of the way and it's okay over there. Selecting everything here. What I think is that this drag forward is too fast. It doesn't make him feel heavy. So I'm going to find that movement. He stretches out. That part's okay. Frame 30. 35 is that middle one where the rock comes, he rocks forward, and then frame 40. So that's the end of the move forward, and then he settles back down again. So to make this take longer, I'm going to move these keys around in the timeline. And to do that, I need to turn them red. So when holding down the Shift button and I click on frame 40 here, I can move that key around. I can select more than one key at a time by holding down Shift, clicking and holding down the mouse button, and then dragging. And then before releasing Shift, I release the mouse. And that makes this multiple selection. And by grabbing the inner buttons here, not the ones on the outside, but the ones in the middle, I can grab 2 keys at once. And what that's doing is making the drag take longer. And if I want to move then like this middle part right back into the middle, I can shift select it and drag it to the middle. So I play that, the drag takes longer, and I think that makes the lamp feel heavy, and lamps are heavy. Now, we also talked about the principle of ease out. Here, the lamp just moves back and stops suddenly. We saw in stop motion even that it looks good to slow down when it starts getting to the end. What I'm going to do is, and it's only with the head control here. So I'm just selecting the one, and I'm backing up a few frames. So to move along the timeline, so far I've just been dragging. I'm holding down the mouse and I'm dragging around. To use the keyboard, it's Option comma to move back, Option period to move forward. And that's something you get into when you're really fine-tuning things. So what I'm going to do is, to make it ease out, I want to back up a few frames here from this last key. So that's Option, comma. I'm going to move back 2 frames for this. And I'm going to hit S. So I've made a key there. It hasn't changed the animation. I just made a key. And then I'm going to shift select the last key. I'm going to move it back a little later. See how it eases out now? A little bit more natural. To understand what just happened, the graph editor can be helpful. So I had that setup that I had before with different screens up. That was panels, layouts, 3 panes, split, left. I kind of did some automatic things automatically here that might not happen for you, but panels. Here I've got the camera selected. Here, panels, perspective selected. And to get this up here, if it didn't just pop up for you, panels, panel, graph editor. The graph editor shows you a graphic representation of the movement. So here, here's that ease out. And this means that the move is happening quickly because it's steep. This means it's happening slowly because it's less steep. And also you can change timing within the graph editor. So if I'm I'm main mouse dragging to select these end controls, and I can move that around, different time, different values. This is getting into the advanced part. If you don't get into the graph editor, that's okay. Personally, I just love working in the graph editor, so I can't help but show you. If I hold down Shift and middle mouse drag to the side, I can just drag the timing and not have it move up and down like that. So here, I just changed the timing so the ease out happens a little bit longer. So to make an ease out here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up into the movement, and that's where you can see what you're doing in the graph editor. I can see that I backed up a little ways into the movement. And what I want to do is I want to copy this key here, 2 frames earlier. So in the timeline, I'm going to middle mouse click with on frame 16, I'm going to middle mouse click 18 and hit S. See, now I have an ease out. So it's subtle, but when he goes into that ease out pose, he doesn't just come to a full stop. So there we go. When I play this, he drags himself forward and eases out. Simple move. Now that you know how to control him and move him around, or once you try this and learn it, perhaps you can get him to do the jump. Or if you want to try the ball, you can turn the ball on, and that's what we'll look at in the next video, how to add the ball. If you just want to work with the lamp, then you can skip that one, but might have some fun having him play with this ball.
All right, so we were talking about this. I might have, yeah, I think I skipped a couple right there. But before I continue with that, let me just take a consensus. How many people are actually thinking of using Maya for their final And if you don't have a microphone, you can just put like you can use the reactions down here and just give me like a thumbs up. All right, so there's 4 of you. All right, so let us take a moment and play the other ones.
So now we're going to get in on posing. By the way, I set it for blue background. That's just my own preference. There's probably other things I've done in this Maya that will look a little different from yours, just because it is customizable. If that interests you, Windows, settings and preferences, color settings, 3D view. Here you can change your background, clicking on that to choose a color and such. But again, that's just something to play around with how you like things to look. So before you start changing everything, do a save as so that you don't copy over your original file. Look, so Anim 1, continue. So when you select something, you may not have this little control here. It may just look plain. You select the this button over here, and this gives you the translation controls. If you select the button under it, that goes into rotation, and you can rotate the base. But in this case, it only spins. When you want to undo, you just hit the Z. There's not Control Z or Command Z, just Z. First thing, try out all the controls. Know what everything does. So let's start at the base. This bottom control, selecting the little wiggly line around it. When you grab an arrow, you can move the base and slide it around. By the way, when you grab one of these little boxes, like one of them, you grab it and you can just move it in all directions. This one, the blue one, on the vertical planes. This one also, when you grab it on a vertical plane. But we're not going to want the lamp to cut through the floor, so I'm going to mainly be using the blue and the red arrows for the base. By the way, if you grab it in the middle, then you can really move it all over the place. That's good for some controls, but not the base. Moving up, you select this arrow, and you don't control anything. Here, you go up to the channel box. Click on a control, let's say the rock front back, so I selected it. When I come out into the window here and hold down the middle mouse button, when I drag it, get this kind of rocking movement. So select left and right, go back into the window here, and drag it, and it rocks that way. Continuing to the third control is for the head. Going to go into translate, and grab this middle control and see that we can move it all over the place. We look at it from the front and move it side to side. We can control it with individuals. I'm grabbing the green arrow and holding down the mouse button, I drag it around and just choose one direction for it to go. I go into rotation mode. I can then tilt the head. The last control, this guy out here, going to is controlling the neck side to side. And for the most part, you'll find it generally best just to stick that out here, so that no matter what you do with the body, the neck stays oriented in the right direction. So we've got him in a simple pose here. It's good to look at your camera view, make sure he still looks good from there and he's in frame. In the next video, we'll look at how to actually get him moving. So to keep this demonstration simple, I'm just going to animate him sliding across. So to do that, I'm going to select all the controls, and to select, I just drag across to create a box around all of the controls. And you might find that this little red line here, that means that there's keys there. If you don't have the little red line, or just to make sure that you have all the keys set, hit S. That locks in the pose. I want him to hold still for 10 frames, just for that little pause. So with everything still selected, I drag along the timeline to frame 10 and hit the letter S. See, that just made a little red line. That means there's a key on everything. Now, a principle of animation is anticipation. So you see here, when nothing's selected, we don't have little tick marks, but they are still in there. So I come forward, let's just like 8 frames. So I'm on frame 18. I'm going to select the head, and to anticipate, he's just going to move back. Maybe down a little bit, but mostly back. Going into rotation, I'm going to have him look up a little bit. So now if I play this, so I go to frame 1 and I hit the play button, he moves back into that anticipation pose. I want him to hold this pose for a moment. So I'm going to go forward some frames, and with everything, I'm going to select everything again and hit S. So now he moves back and he holds that pose. Then he's going to slide forward. First thing he's going to do is just extend his neck, because it's the power of the neck that's going to drive him forward. So I'm just going to drag that neck forward. I like to lean him forward a bit. By the way, here's some hotkeys. E puts you into rotation mode, so I can move his head down. W puts you back into translate. Q turns them all off so that there's no controller there. So again, W for translate, E for rotate. And so he anticipates, extends his neck. I'm going to select all the controls again, hit the letter S to get that key. Now he's going to drag himself forward. Let's say it takes 10 frames. And drag him forward. And I'm wondering, how does this look from the camera view? Panels, perspective, camera. So he's still within the view. That's one of the important things about animation, is when you're in this computer world where you can move around everywhere, you're still animating for a camera. So if I play this from here, well, one thing, he's not even in view here, so I can change my camera by holding down Command or Control and middle mouse dragging. So now I get him back into frame, and maybe I just won't have him come forward that far. How about that? So I'm going to move him back. Play that, and he drags himself forward. And once he arrives, again, I'm going to select everything, and I'm just going to keep animating within the camera view. And I come forward some frames. I've kind of run out of room here. 48 frames is 2 seconds. I'm going to make it 3 seconds, which is 72 frames. So he drags himself forward, and then let's just say 12 frames later, putting on frame 52, he's going to return just his head back. So again, I have to unselect everything by clicking out in the open, just select his head, have him move back, go ahead and come up, head comes up, and play that animation. And that's the basic movement. Now, one of the things with computer animation is you can add animation So, oh, by the way, I was doing some changes, and so if suddenly you can't see your controls, show NURB curves. I know that may not sound like anything, but that's what these are, NURB curves. So remember, we have that rocking control. And I didn't use that when I was animating, but I can add it. So he pulls himself forward. So halfway through the drag, I'm going to select that control, rock forward. And I'm going to have him rock, move forward. And but now his neck doesn't stretch as far. So I'm going to select his neck and move that forward too. Now we get the plate moving as well. So in this video, we looked at how to pose the character and put in some basic motion. In the next video, we'll look at how to refine that animation.
All right, so that was the refining was the first one I played. That was this one. All right, so let me pause this again. So how many of you who said yes to Maya would be thinking of using the ball? Do you want me to play that video for you? Okay, perfect.
Okay, so I've got the lamp sliding forward. Now I'd like to add the ball. So I turn the ball back on by clicking this first box here to bring up the V for visible, brings the ball back. Going to frame one, just get the lamp out of the way. And so we can review the controls. We've got 3 controls. The bottom one controls the just the position of the ball. So you can grab the arrows and move them around. If I go to rotation mode, you can see it's grayed out. That means you can't rotate the ball that way. This middle control, it has rotation. As you can see, it doesn't actually do anything. When you come up here, it's for the squash and stretch controls. So squash bottom, I select it up here. I middle mouse drag in the screen view, hit Z to undo. Squash top, I guess if it hits the ceiling, you can have that squash to hit the ceiling. Hitting Z to zero it out. Another way to zero things out, by the way, like let's say you moved it, then you do other things and undo. You know, you can't just undo this because you've done some other things. If you come up here, click in the box that you want to change and enter a number, in this case 0, enter, then you can, it returns it to 0. The top control is the spin. So I want the lamp to hit the ball as it slides across. So somewhere around here, let's say frame 38. So I'm going to move the ball into that position, hotkey W to go into translation mode, drag him over. I zoom in by scrolling the middle mouse button, and then I can line it up there. So it made since I have auto key on, it made a key there. But on frame 1, like if I drag over to frame 1, it rolls in. Could do that, but I think I'd like the ball just to be sitting there. So I'm going to right mouse click, bring up this menu and delete. So now the ball holds still and the lamp comes up and hits it. And then at the end of the shot, we just skipped over to frame 72. Gonna drag it forward. How far should it go? Well, that depends on the camera view. Let's go to the camera view. Because I don't want it to drag out of frame. I want it to land right there. So now if I play this, bonk, well, it cuts into the ball too much. But I can fix that by dragging along the timeline, holding down the left button, and going to where it intersects the most, and then move the ball forward, correct it. Now let's see what happens. Okay. So now it doesn't cut into it so much. I do want it to roll. So it's going to start rolling on frame 38. So I'm going to select the roll control, hit S to make a key, Doesn't have to be perfectly lined up. Let's kind of move it. I'm just doing RX though, because I just want to roll forward. So this is its first pose. I'm gonna go to the last frame. Just gonna take a guess of how many times it's gonna roll and roll it. And let's have a look. Rolls too much. If I kind of single frame through here, you just kind of see if the stripe moves too much. So I'm gonna go to the last frame and roll it back one. Try that. That feels better. So if this is the animation that I want to turn in, the next thing I'm going to do is record a movie of it, and that's what we'll look at in the next video. So I like the animation. I want to make a movie. For this demo, I've switched over to Windows using remote access because I'm going to guess that most of you are on Windows. We'll do the Mac version too, but first we'll look at Windows. Now for any version though, I want to clean this up. I don't want all those controls in my movie. Show, turn off nerve curves by selecting it, and then show, and also I'm going to turn off the grid. Now, just as review, if you've got all these other things on here and you just want to clean things up really quick, first off, you can tear off a menu by clicking that top part. And then what we can do is go none polygons. Everything is made of polygons. So if you only have polygons selected here, there, nice clean shot. So I want to do a play blast. So I'm going to select not the play blast word. I'm going to select the box next to it. This is the options. And the things we want to change here is the format. AVI is okay. And you might not have these options on your computer. This is going to vary depending on operating system and what you have installed. AVI is okay. I'm going to switch this to QuickTime. Encoding. You want N264. Let's find that right there. Display size from render settings. This is so we get the same aspect ratio that we've been working in. Scale, quality, let's crank both of them up. Let's make this look nice. Let's stretch this out so we can see more here. So format, QuickTime, if you're doing AVI, I'm not sure. Let's just try the top one. I'm still going with quality and scale up full. Let's save the file, browse to choose a location. Let's save it to the desktop, give it a name here. Oh, use the naming convention, which was that exercise 6.1 name. That's me. Oh, I have to save to the video folder. Okay, if you insist. And then play blast. Goes pretty quick. And for this, it launches automatically. And I have my movie to turn in. Now let's look at that on a Mac. Well, the things to change are the format. And this is going to be different for Windows and Mac. For mine, AV Foundation, encoding, H.264. So I click the Save to File. Clicking Browse to choose a location and a name for it. Let's not hide the extension. Play blast. Where I've got things set up here, it automatically launches it in QuickTime, and I can play it, and that's what I'm going to turn in.
All right, so I hope that all gives you all a good idea of how to get through that Maya. But let us continue here because let's now talk about the sticky thing, which is the graph. This is the graph editor. By the way, when John Lasseter was doing Andre and Wally B and Luxo Jr. and all those very, very early animations, he was basically using a graph editor. He would set the key on the stage and then he would go into the graph editor and animate it like this. That's all he did because they didn't have all the fancy controls that we have now. All right, so this is an alternate. to animating in Maya. So all of you who are thinking about, oh my God, I can't handle Maya right now, or my computer can't handle Maya. This one's called Stick Nodes.
Stick
And-
Nodes is available in the App Store. There's a free version and a paid version that has a bunch more features. Since we're just exploring animation, I'm going to just use the free version, which being free, of course, you got little ads to deal with at the beginning. But once you're past those, a good first thing to do is to save as, to give your animation a name. Once that's done, it's good to set it for 24 frames per second so it animates smoothly. I'm going to animate a simple jump for this demonstration. And so it starts off there on your first frame. We can get him into position. By default, it's like he's facing forward, but by dragging the joint controls and get him into a side view, get him into the pose that you want. That's his neutral position. The second pose is the anticipation. So by clicking here, the new frame button, you can then put him into his next pose. You can see you get a nice little ghosting effect to see where he's been. I'm especially using that to be able to line up the feet. So I can move the body, which moves the feet, but then I manually move the feet into place so that they match where he was before. So then I get him into that anticipation position, can toggle between the two. And I'm going to even make him squash down even more. So, once you get him into a pose, really see, is that as good as you can get, or can you make it better? For the extended jumping pose, I'm going to copy the first pose because it's closer to what I want. To do that, I'm going to go to the first frame, hit the copy button, go to the second frame, and hit the paste button, and that puts a copy of that pose into frame 3. And then I can adjust it into the position that I want. The next pose is where he's scrunched up airborne. For this, I'm going to click the new frame button and get him into position, speeding things up here. You don't need to see this process. Every once in a while, it's going to ask if you want to save, which you do. Then the next pose is him coming down the fall. So I'm going to click the new frame button and make the adjustments, again, sped up here. So I'm going to get him into the pose that I want for that and the position, and then toggle between those poses. See, is it right each time? So here I see that I want this pose to be just a little bit more in between the extension pose and the falling pose. A main benefit of computer animation over stop motion is this, that you can go back and make changes as you go. And once he's made contact with the ground, the next pose is the recovery. This is once again one that I want to copy because I see that the anticipation pose is a lot like the landing pose. So I'm going to hit the copy button. I'm going to go to my last frame that I did and hit the paste button. And you can see I've just now copied that pose. I slide him over into position first, lining up the feet, and then adjust the pose to get what I want. And then finally, he goes into his neutral position, which is a lot like his first position. So again, I copy that pose, paste it at the end, and drag him over. Now, of course, when I hit play, he's moving way too fast. Now it's time for timing. I got the poses, now for the timing. To do this, I go to the first frame and I hit add tween frame. And this puts in a 50% pose. And to make him ease in, I go back to the first frame and hit it again. And then I go back to the first frame and I hit it again. This creates a slowdown. And I don't want him moving right away at the first frame. So I'm going to set a keyframe to have the frame pause for a moment. In this case, 0.75. And we slide along here, we see that he scrunches down. I want him to ease out. So I go to this frame before the anticipation frame and I add more tweens. So when I play back, I can see that he scrunches up and jumps up. I'm going to add a pause in the anticipation pose. And to ease out, I'm going to add more tweens. To do this, I keep going back to the anticipation pose and hit the tween button. So now he scrunches up pauses, and jumps. And then I think once you start working with this tween button, you'll get the idea that you're using this to extend the time between the poses that you made. And you can choose whether it extends at the beginning and the end or right in the middle. Just explore that button and what it does when you add in-betweens before and after your main poses. It's adding ease in and out and extending the time. And take your time on this. Make it, because it's not destructive. You can undo and just keep refining it. Again, that's the benefit of computer animation. And then finally, I want him to hold at the end. So I go to that last frame and I add that pause for a whole second. I can play that back and I can see the action happening. The pauses at the right time. Looks good. So I'm going to save it. As you can see, export MP4 is grayed out because that's a paid feature, but a GIF is fine for this exploration of animation. Give it a name. Doesn't seem to just carry over the file name, so just calling it jump, and export the animation. That takes a moment, but once it's done, that's what you turn in. And that's a simple way to try out computer animation.
All right, how'd that look, everybody? I think that this just this we can go over next week, but this is just editing your files together. So let's do this. Let's take our 5-minute break right now, and when we come back, we'll do our critiques. Take 5-minute break, please. Sorry, I realized I wasn't recording. So I'm just going to play this one again, just so that it winds up for the people who want to look at it again. And then maybe replay this first one too. Okay, let's take a look at the closer look.
Will Vinson represents the high point of clay animation. You look at the detail and just how clean the animation is, even in transformations. Just look at the formation of the piano. This is done, looks like a combination of resculpting under the camera as well as replacement animation. It could all be replacement animation, but there's still, every sculpture is just kept really clean. We get over, let's go into some lip sync here. Each of these mouth shapes is a new sculpting of the same sculpture, but completely redoing the lips and smoothing it out and making it really clean. We can also see that in Aardman animation, like here in Chicken Run. A lot of this is replacement animation, but there is some sculpting that's going on as well under the camera. If you go back to earlier clay animation though, and this is kind of what we want to lean towards in these assignments, like if you look at the guy's face here, we can see little marks, little dents, fingerprints, the evidence of, especially here, the evidence of the animator. And these are still entertaining. For this assignment, rather than even trying for the refinement of Will Vinson and Aardman, I want to go back to more of the experimental phase of Will Vinson. And these are just globs that are animated to the music. We won't be trying to do to the sound, but it's like they're just having fun with clay. I mean, we're looking at this video practically just for this scene here of Metamorphosis, where they're just squishing this thing around and forming it into new shapes. Looking at how they did this, just smushing parts, squeezing it more and more. Looks like maybe chopping it as they go. But here, this gets really crazy. In Great Cognito, we get also some more metamorphosis happening. Let's single frame through that one. Peeling off parts, changing things here and there, and then resculpting the face a little bit every frame. Chopping him down. Ugh. Sort of a grotesque shape. So let's go for that kind of under the camera sculpting. Here's a combination of replacement and movement. But to get like the worm to go through the apple, he's having to be taken apart and put back together. So here is also a lot of replacement animation. We'll look at how to do that. That's fun too. But this one is especially good example of changing things under the camera and playing around with the just everything that you can do with clay. Here we can kind of single frame through this, where it's just like a whole new sculpture here, and each frame is just the same clay, but being changed around and resculpted frame by frame. Where at first it's rolling it together, but then squashes it together. So as you watch the demos, think about what you would find to be fun to do under the camera.
All right. Which of these principles of animation can we explore in animation? Squash and stretch? Yes. Exaggeration? Yeah. Slow in, slow out? Yeah, all of the above.
All of above.
All of the above. All right, let's take a look at what else is in here. They're talking about using any kind of clay. There are different kinds, and different colors are great. So hopefully you have your clay on hand. Which of these is needed for animating in clay? It was funny because when I first looked at this, I was like, well, yeah, scissors, but it's the actual answer is the cleanup wipes. Because for some reason, there's a chemical in there that helps clean up the really stainy parts of the colored clay. All right, and then they're just giving you, we're at the hour right now, so they're just giving you the heads up of keeping your camera steady. And then the other video is how to animate backwards. So that some of you have already tried that. So those are my notes for today. All right, and then they're talking about installing Maya for the stick figure thing that we just talked about, stick nodes. All right, let me see if there's anyone who just uploaded something. Cutout. All right, so I'm going to take a minute and just go through. Oh, that's the other class. That's the other class. Sorry. Okay, let me answer any questions.
Yes, so I'm a little bit confused as to what our assignment is. Are we doing the clay or what are we doing?
We're doing clay for Monday, and then Maya or the stick figure thing, which I just gave you the link for, right?
Yes.
That's for a week from today.
Okay.
But I wanted to do that early because Savija was worried about it. Everyone was worried about. Some people can't load Maya onto their computers.
Got it.
And so when we get into Monday, everybody, I will take a consensus from the class to make sure that you have picked, and that's the point of doing your choice right now, is whether are you going to do Maya or are you going to do the stick figure thing. And if you can't do either one, then on Monday, I'll give you some alternative things that can get you through digital computer animation.
Oh, yeah, I was wondering, can we use Adobe Animate or no?
Maybe, yes. That is one of the options. And so when we get into Monday, I can show you a whole bunch of cool things to do in Flash. And that's really weird too, that Adobe went in and, oh, we renamed Flash, it's now Animate. But it's still an FLA. When you save that Animate file, it's still a Flash file. I just want to drive to Cupertino and start smacking people around a little bit. So yes, more than likely, if you want to work in Flash, I have tons of experience with working with Flash, and I can show you some cool things to do with Flash that you really can't do with any other application. All right?
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
No, no worries, no worries. Anybody else have any other questions? Oh, Isabel said she uploaded the bouncing ball. I don't see where you uploaded the bouncing ball, Isabel.
Hold on, let me check.
And if anyone else doesn't have any questions, you can just go ahead and have the rest of your Wednesday, and I'll see you on Monday.
Thank you.
Do your
Thank you.
class, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, Isabel, did you upload it?
Yeah, I uploaded it like on Monday or
Oh, okay. Yeah, I might have looked at it. That's why it didn't show up as new. So yeah, I apologize for that.
It's all right.
Okay. Let me get my folder back out here. Isabel. Okay, good. So if I look at this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the beginning and pause. And I'm going to just draw over this. Except now I don't know where my Zoom thing went. There we go. Hold on one second. All right, so within this example here, Isabel, remember that as an animator, you're concerned with your arc, right? You're concerned with decrease in vertical momentum and decrease in horizontal momentum. If this is half the arc of the bouncing ball, then the decrease in space would be about right here. So these two distances are about the same. So you cut that in half to find your second bounce. And then you just cut this in half to find your third bounce. And sometimes you have to modulate this and say, maybe that third bounce is a little lower. And then the fourth bounce is like this. So it actually is quite a bit steeper. So this is A and then B. When you do this, you want to make sure that you're easing out of this key position here and that you're easing into the motion and it's accelerating. And I think that this is okay. But I have this intuition that you stretch this just a little bit too early, because this drawing should be the squash. This should be stretch. And then we can stretch this one. But then after this first squash and stretch, there's probably not enough momentum to do squash and stretch on these two. But then remember, now you're slowing down to the top of the arc, and then you're speeding up as you get out of it. These positions should be parallel with each other. And then you do the same thing. You slow into this key position, slow out of it, and so on for 3 or 4 bounces. So if we look at this and go frame by frame, hold on. Oh, I went backwards. Yeah, you've got too many stretch drawings. You only need one stretch drawing. And only one squash drawing. So you've got like 4 or 5 squash drawings and 4 or 5 stretch drawings. So that makes your animation very squashy, stretchy. So this would be good if it was like a marshmallow character who is doing things on their own accord, if you will. Total credit for doing the assignment, but and remember that we were a little bit off the mark with that because it was supposed to be a flip book. But the author of the class decided that the flip-a-clip thing was okay. So just make sure that you go back in there, and whenever you're animating something, just plan. Animation is always about planning. So go to a search window and just really kind of research as much as you can on anything before you even start thinking about it. Okay?
Okay,
All right, thanks, Isabel.
thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.